building that breathes. Some places are forgotten for a reason. I should have listened to the warnings. I was always drawn to abandoned places. The thrill of stepping where no one else dared, uncovering forgotten histories, chasing that eerie silence only decay can bring. It was addicting. So when I heard about Holloway Complex, I knew I had to see it for myself. It was a massive structure, once an old asylum that had been hastily shut down in the 80s after patients went missing. People swore the building was alive, that it had a presence, that no one who went inside ever came back the same. The stories were ridiculous, or so I thought. The first step in. The asylum loomed ahead, tall and gray, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the overcast sky. The front doors had been barricaded, but there was always another way in. I found a broken window near the east wing. Crawling inside, I landed in a dark, stale-smelling corridor, my flashlight cutting through the dust-heavy air. The walls were peeling, the floor littered with old patient records and rusted medical tools. There were still gurneys in the halls, as if the place had been abandoned overnight. A strange hum filled the air, faint, rhythmic, like the building was breathing. I shook off the feeling and moved deeper inside. The rotting hallways, each step felt heavier than the last. The deeper I went, the more the air thickened, like stepping into water. I passed empty rooms, some with overturned beds, others with patient restraints still bolted to the walls. My flashlight flickered as I walked, struggling to keep up. Then I noticed something strange. The hallways didn't make sense. I had taken a right turn, but when I checked my map, I was somehow on the opposite side of the building. The corridors stretched too long, doors appearing where they shouldn't be. It was like the building itself was shifting, rearranging. And then, the first door creaked open. Something else is here. I froze. The door ahead of me had been closed. I was sure of it. Now it stood slightly ajar, darkness spilling from within. I aimed my flashlight inside. First, there was nothing. Just an empty patient room, old bed frames rusting in the corner. Then I saw them. Footprints, fresh, in the dust. And they weren't mine. A long, shuddering breath echoed from inside the room. I ran. The basement that shouldn't exist. I ran until my lungs burned. The halls twisted, leading me downward. Then I saw it. A metal door, rusted and massive. A sign above it read, "Sublevel access, restricted." This wasn't on the blueprints. The asylum had no basement. And yet, the door was open. A stairwell stretched into blackness. The hum from earlier now a low, steady pulse. I should have turned back, but something pulled me forward. The room of many hands. The basement air was wet, stagnant. Faint red emergency lights flickered along the ceiling, barely illuminating the endless corridor ahead. And then I saw them. Handprints, hundreds smeared along the walls. Some small, like children's, others too large to be human. They pulsed as if they had just been placed. A noise came from behind me, a whisper. "Why did you come here?" I turned and saw something move in the darkness. The thing in the dark. I aimed my flashlight. It only caught a glimpse. Something tall, its limbs too long, its skin wet and stretched. It didn't have eyes, but I knew it was looking at me. Then it smiled. A wide, unnatural grin, stretching too far across its face. And it moved, not walking, gliding, fast. I stumbled backward, tripping over something soft. I looked down. A body, fresh, still warm. Their eyes had been removed. No way out. I turned and ran for my life. The hall stretched. The stairwell was gone. The walls pulsed, the handprints moving on their own. The thing behind me laughed. The sound was wet, bubbling, like something choking on blood. I saw another door ahead. I threw myself against it, tumbling inside, and froze. It was a surveillance room. Monitors lined the walls, each one displaying live footage of me, every angle, every hallway, every step I had taken. And then, one of the cameras changed. A new feed appeared, a room filled with dozens of bodies, all sitting upright, all missing their eyes. And in the front row, An empty seat, waiting. For me. You can never leave. The speakers crackled. A voice whispered, "Sit down." The door behind me slammed shut. The monitors flickered. One by one, the bodies stood up. The red lights pulsed faster, in time with the hum. No, not a hum. A heartbeat. The building itself was alive, and I was inside it. The voice whispered again, "You belong to us now." The last thing I saw before the lights went black was my own face appearing on the monitors, smiling. The building that doesn't exist. Some places shouldn't exist. I learned that too late. It started with a rumor, a forgotten building, deep within the city's industrial district. No records, no history, just an empty lot on every official map. But people talked. A gray structure hidden between warehouses. No windows, no signs, just a single rusted door. And those who went inside, they never came back. I didn't believe in ghost stories. I was an urban explorer, a thrill seeker. I had broken into abandoned hospitals, collapsed subways, even a ruined cathedral. But this was different. Because when I found the building, it shouldn't have been there. But it was. The first step inside. It was raining that night. Cold, relentless. The streets were empty. The air thick with mist. I stood in front of the building, its faceless concrete stretching toward the dark sky. I ran my hand along the wall. No cracks, no graffiti. It was as if the world had forgotten this place. And then I touched the door. A shiver shot through me. A static charge that made my skin crawl. But I was here. I had to see what was inside. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The air inside was wrong. Thick, stagnant, too cold. My flashlight flickered as I stepped in. The door creaked shut behind me, and the silence swallowed everything. The first hallway stretched ahead, longer than it should have been. The floor was smooth, polished concrete, untouched by time. No debris, no dust. Too clean. I checked my camera. The lens fogged over, the screen flickering. That's when I noticed something impossible. My footprints. I turned back toward the entrance, and my footprints were gone. Hallways that don't end. I forced myself forward. The hallway branched into identical corridors, stretching into the distance. No signs, no doors, just endless, empty paths. Something felt off. Every time I turned a corner, the hallway behind me seemed shorter, like the building was rearranging itself. The silence pressed against my ears, so thick it felt like something was listening. Then, tap, 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 footsteps. Not mine. I killed my flashlight. The darkness swallowed me, thick and complete. My breath slowed. The footsteps stopped. A pause. Then, they started again. Closer. I gripped my camera, turning it to night vision. The screen flickered, revealing the hallway ahead, empty, stretching into darkness. Then I turned it toward where I came from, and my blood turned to ice. A figure stood there, tall, still, faceless, and then it tilted its head. The room that shouldn't be. I ran. The hallways twisted, the walls shifting. My lungs burned. My pulse pounded. Every turn led to another identical corridor, stretching endlessly. Then, a door. A single, rusted metal door at the end of the hallway. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I threw it open. Inside was a room frozen in time. An office, untouched by decay. A desk, a lamp, neatly stacked papers. The air smelled of old books and static. And at the center of the desk, a black telephone. It rang. My breath hitched, kept ringing. I stepped forward. My hands trembled as I reached out. Then I picked it up, and a voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." The forgotten floor. The lights exploded. The air rushed out of the room, like I had stepped into a vacuum. My ears rang. My vision blurred. Then I was somewhere else. Not the hallway, not the office. Somewhere beneath the building. The walls were black concrete, pulsing like a living thing. The air hummed with a deep, rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat. Rows of desks stretched endlessly, each occupied by figures, motionless, frozen mid-task. Their heads bowed, their fingers scraping the surfaces in endless repetition. I stepped closer. One of them twitched. Then they all turned at the same time. Their faces were blank, featureless. And then they stood up. The thing that watches. The room shuddered. The heartbeat sound grew louder, vibrating through my bones. The figures began to move, stepping toward me in perfect unison. Their hands clawed the air, their heads jerking unnaturally. I turned and ran. A door appeared ahead, my only escape. But before I reached it, something massive stirred behind me. The ceiling split open, revealing an eye. An impossibly large, unblinking eye. It watched me, studied me, and then, in a voice that wasn't a voice, it whispered, "You are not supposed to leave." The figures lunged. The last exit. I crashed through the door, fell through blackness, and suddenly, I was outside. The rain poured down. The streetlights flickered. The building was gone. Just an empty lot, like it had never been there. I gasped, my heart hammering, my body shaking. I reached for my camera. The footage was still recording. My hands trembled as I rewound. The hallways, the figures, the office. It was all there. But the last frame, the last thing it recorded, was me, standing in the black room, the faceless figures surrounding me, and behind me, that impossible eye staring, watching, and then, a single line of text flickered onto the screen. "You never left." The forgotten floors. Some places are meant to be forgotten. I learned that the hard way. It started as a simple job. Urban exploration had become my obsession. Finding abandoned places, documenting their decay, and posting them online. When I heard about the Galloway building, I knew I had to check it out. It was a massive, 12-story structure downtown, long abandoned, its history tangled in tragedy and rumors. Fires, disappearances, and unexplained deaths had earned it a reputation. No one had stepped foot inside for years. The perfect find, or so I thought. The entrance. Getting inside was easier than expected. The front doors were chained, but an old side entrance had been forced open long ago. The air inside was thick with dust and mildew, the scent of rotting wood and rusted metal clinging to everything. The building was a corpse, hollow and lifeless. At least that's what I told myself. I moved carefully, my flashlight sweeping over cracked walls and broken furniture. Faded office signs and abandoned cubicles hinted at the building's past. Once a thriving business center, now nothing but a shell. I set up my camera and began recording. I narrated everything as I walked, describing the decay, the strange silence, the way the air felt wrong. The atmosphere was unsettling, but that was normal. Abandoned places always had an energy to them. Then I found the stairwell, and that's where things went wrong. The 12th floor, the main elevator shaft had long since collapsed, leaving the stairwell as my only route upward. My goal was the top floor, the 12th. That was where most of the legends revolved. The first few floors were uneventful, just layers of dust and decay. But the higher I climbed, the heavier the air became. By the 8th floor, I noticed it, the silence had changed. It was no longer just the absence of sound. It was a presence, a weight pressing against me, muffling even my own footsteps. By the 10th floor, my flashlight started flickering. By the 11th, I swore I could hear breathing. Not mine, something else, something above me. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed turn back, but I was too close. Then I reached floor 12, and I realized I was not alone. The wrong floor. Something was off the moment I stepped onto the 12th floor. The decay, the dust, it was all wrong. Unlike the lower levels, this floor felt untouched. The walls weren't peeling, the lights, though dim, still flickered overhead. The air hummed with a strange static, like an old television left on a dead channel. The doors lining the hall were closed, each one identical. No signs, no numbers. Then I saw the footprints, fresh, leading deeper inside. A cold sweat broke out over my skin. I wasn't alone. Still, I followed, because something drew me forward. because I wasn't in control anymore. The room at the end. The footprints led to the last door on the right. It was slightly ajar, and as I approached, I heard it. A soft hum, rhythmic, unnatural, like a machine breathing. I pushed the door open. Inside was a perfectly intact office, untouched by time. The desk was neatly arranged, the papers crisp and white. A single, flickering lamp cast a pale glow, and in the center of the room was a chair, facing away from me, with someone sitting in it. A chill crawled up my spine. The figure was completely still, their head tilted slightly, as if listening. Then, they moved. Just a small twitch, but it was enough. My body locked. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. Then they stood up, slowly, and they turned. There was no face, just a smooth, featureless void where eyes, a nose, and a mouth should be. And yet, I knew it was watching me. The hum grew louder. The walls shifted, the floor beneath me twisting, stretching longer than it should have. I stumbled backward, my camera clattering to the floor. The figure stepped forward. I didn't wait. I ran. The never-ending stairwell. I tore through the hallway, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. The air thickened. The lights dimmed. The floor warped beneath me. I reached the stairwell and threw myself down it. I should have reached the 11th floor in seconds. But the steps didn't end. They kept going. Down, down, endlessly down. The air grew colder. The walls tightened. And then, a new door appeared. One that shouldn't have existed. A heavy metal door, rusted and ancient. I had no choice. Pushed it open. The place beneath, the room beyond, was impossible. It was a vast, empty void, stretching infinitely in all directions. A cold, flickering light barely illuminated the space. And then I saw them. Rows and rows of chairs, each one occupied, each figure identical, all featureless, all facing me. Then, in perfect unison, they stood up. I turned and ran, my breath ragged, my vision tunneling. The door had vanished, replaced by an endless corridor. Behind me, the sound of footsteps multiplied. Faster, closer. The walls collapsed inward, swallowing me in darkness. And then, the last recording. I woke up outside. I was lying on the sidewalk in front of the Galloway building, my camera clutched in my hands. It was morning. I had no memory of how I got out. But the camera was recording. Hands shaking, I pressed play. First, it was just static. Then, a single frame, a photo of me, standing in the void, with the faceless figures surrounding me. And beneath the image, a single, blinking line of text appeared on my screen. You never left. The echoes of Hollowcrest Asylum. I should have never gone inside. It was just supposed to be a dare, a stupid, reckless challenge from my friends. Stay in Hollowcrest Asylum for one night, they said. Prove you're not a coward. I laughed it off at first, but something about the way they talked about the place unsettled me. Hollowcrest had been abandoned for decades. A decaying psychiatric hospital on the edge of town. It loomed over the landscape like a rotting corpse. The stories about it were the stuff of urban legend. Patients disappearing, doctors performing inhumane experiments, staff members who went insane themselves. The asylum shut down abruptly in 1972 after an entire ward of patients vanished overnight. The state refused to demolish it. No one wanted to touch the place. Yet, there I was, standing at the rusted gates, gripping my flashlight as the wind howled through the broken windows like a dying breath. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind me. Inside the hollow, the air was thick, stale, wrong. My flashlight flickered as I stepped forward, my footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness of the main hall. Peeling wallpaper curled like dead skin, and old medical equipment lay scattered, rusting and forgotten. I exhaled, trying to steady my nerves. Just make it till sunrise. That's all. Then I heard it. A soft shuffle in the darkness ahead. I froze. The beam of my flashlight trembled as I pointed it down the hall. Nothing moved, but I swore I had heard something. I swallowed hard and kept going. The deeper I ventured, the more the building seemed to swallow me whole. The walls felt closer, the air thicker. Every so often, I heard whispers, faint, unintelligible murmurs slithering through the silence. And then I found the room. It was marked Ward C in faded, blood-red letters. Unlike the other doors, this one was open. Something inside me screamed not to go in, but my feet carried me forward anyway. The room that waited. The air inside was colder, much colder. My breath came out in visible puffs as I swept my flashlight across the room. Rusty bed frames, straps hanging limply from restraints, a single ancient wheelchair sitting in the center. Then, click, the sound of a camera. I whipped around, my heart pounding. No one was there, but in the corner of the room, an old, dust-covered Polaroid camera sat on a small table. I swallowed, my hands shaking as I picked it up. It was warm, and a fresh photo was sliding out of it. I waited, dread curling in my stomach as the image developed. And then, my throat closed. The photo was of me, standing in the room, but there was someone else in the picture. Right behind me, a tall, gaunt figure with sunken eyes and a mouth stretched too wide, grinning. I dropped the camera, and then I heard the laughter. Not alone. It was soft at first, almost playful. But then it grew, distorted and wrong, echoing from every direction. I ran. The hallways twisted in ways that didn't make sense. Doors that were open before were now slammed shut. The floor seemed endless, stretching longer than it should have. And all the while, the laughter followed me. My breath was ragged, my legs burning as I turned a corner and slammed into something. No, someone. I fell back, scrambling, my flashlight skidding across the floor. In the dim glow, I saw it. The figure from the photo. Tall, impossibly thin. Its body jerked as if its bones were breaking with every movement. Its eyes hollow, sunken pits, locked onto me. Its mouth twitched, stretched, curling into that awful, jagged grin. Then it spoke. Not in words, in whispers. 1,000 voices, all at once, crawling into my head like insects. Stay. My vision blurred. My head pounded. The walls shifted around me, warping. I clawed at the floor, trying to move, trying to escape. Then the figure lunged, and everything went black. The last photo. I woke up outside. The sun was rising, casting long shadows over the asylum. I didn't remember leaving. I didn't remember anything. My hands were ice cold, my body trembling. I staggered to my feet, my pulse roaring in my ears. Then I felt it, something heavy in my pocket. I reached inside, my fingers brushing against something smooth. Polaroid photo. My breath hitched as I pulled it out. It was a picture of me, lying on the asylum floor, and standing over me was the figure, still grinning, and beneath the image, written in smudged, black ink, "See you soon."